There's a comeback story that gets told wrong almost every time you hear it. A legendary rider, gone from the Isle of Man TT and motorcycle Grand Prix racing for over a decade. Then, at 38, legs still carrying the damage from a career-ending car crash, he shows up on the most dangerous racetrack on Earth and wins. That's the legend. It's almost true, and almost is where this gets interesting. His name is Mike Hailwood. In 1967, he was the best motorcycle racer alive. Then he vanished from the Isle of Man TT and from motorcycle Grand Prix racing for 11 years. But the sport he came back to wasn't the one he left. This is the real story of Mike Hailwood's 1978 comeback and why the truth beats the legend. By 1967, Mike Hailwood was, by any honest measure, the greatest motorcycle racer of his generation. 9 world championships, 12 TT wins. That year alone, he won the senior TT on the Isle of Man's mountain course, 37.73 miles of public road, stone walls, farmhouses, telegraph poles, and blind corners where riders were pushing well past 100 miles an hour. Then Honda pulled out. At the end of 1967, Honda withdrew its factory teams from Grand Prix racing entirely. Hailwood's works, ride, the machine, the mechanics, the entire championship structure built around him was gone overnight. Reports at the time suggested a large payment kept him from immediately joining a rival factory, though the exact contract and figure were never verified. What's certain is that the road that made him a legend had closed, and nobody handed him a replacement. So he leaned harder into cars, a discipline he wasn't new to. Hailwood had actually made his first Formula One starts back in 1963 and 1964, squeezing them in around his motorcycle world championships. With the Honda door closed, that sideline became the focus. A full Formula One campaign, then a European Formula 2 title in 1972. It wasn't a career built from zero. It was an existing second discipline he now had the time to chase properly. Motorcycle racing, and the TT specifically, faded into his rearview mirror, and the paddock settled on an assumption. That chapter of Hailwood's life was finished. Nobody expected him back, not because he'd lost anything, but because 11 years away from the mountain course, on top of his age and the injuries still to come, made a safe, competitive return look like a very long shot. The mountain course doesn't forgive hesitation. It's 37.73 miles of ordinary public road, stone walls, telegraph poles, farm gates, taken at speeds where a blind crest has to be read from memory and from real-time judgment of the conditions in front of you, all at once. 11 years away from that course isn't a long vacation. By any normal standard, it's a career-ending gap. And it wasn't only Hailwood who'd have to prove himself. The TT he'd left in 1967 wasn't the TT anymore. Safety pressure had been building around the mountain course for years. Riders and journalists openly questioning whether a public road circuit belonged in a modern world championship at all. The sport itself was about to change shape underneath him, whether he came back or not. In 1974, disaster struck first. A crash at the Nürburgring during a Formula One race left Hailwood with a serious right leg injury, threatening the second career he'd spent years building. For a while, it looked like the story might end there, not with a triumphant return, but with an injury that simply closed the book. Then, in 1976, the pressure that had been building around the Isle of Man finally won. That year's TT was the last to carry motorcycle Grand Prix status. The British Grand Prix moved to Silverstone, and in 1977, organizers introduced Formula TT, a production-derived world championship class built to give the island international relevance again, after it had lost its Grand Prix status. A brand new championship needs a credible early result, or it dies quietly. Formula TT nearly got one immediately. In that first race, a Ducati ridden by Roger Nichols led before a fuel stop and finished just 38.4 seconds behind winner Phil Reed's Honda when bad weather cut the event short after 4 laps. Remember that number. Ducati wasn't a sleeping giant waiting for a famous name to wake it up. It was already close to winning, with a different rider, a full year before Hailwood entered the picture. Then, in mid-August 1977, at the British Grand Prix meeting at Silverstone, Hailwood found his way to Ducati dealer Steve Wynn. Accounts from those close to the deal describe a simple exchange, not a grand pitch. Wynn had a competitive Ducati and a shot at the following year's Formula TT. Hailwood wanted a way back onto the island. Nothing was signed that day. A short conversation and a handshake, with a formal contract following later. But the idea took hold, and by the time the two men left Silverstone, Wynn already knew Hailwood was serious about the TT. Here's where the popular version of this story falls apart completely. The legend says Hailwood hadn't touched a motorcycle in 11 years. That's false. He'd been away from the TT and from motorcycle Grand Prix racing for 11 years, not from motorcycles themselves. 2 months after that Silverstone conversation, in October 1977, Hailwood traveled to Australia and finished 6th overall and 2nd in the 750 cubic centimeter class at the demanding Castrol 6-hour endurance race partnered with Jim Skaysbrook. Why does that matter? Because he wasn't stepping off a couch and onto a race bike for the first time in a decade. With Wynn already lining up the TT program back in England, Hailwood spent the months in between rebuilding current racing form on the other side of the world, not stepping into a plan nobody knew about yet, but sharpening himself for one that was already in motion. Back home, the machine itself was taking shape, and it wasn't a one-man garage project built on nostalgia. 3 organizations contributed to this effort, each in a different role. Steve Wynn's dealership, Sports Motorcycles, organized and entered the effort. Ducati sold the racing machines to the program, built the engines, and provided factory-level technical support. And NCR, an independent Bologna-based racing specialist founded by former Ducati factory mechanics and closely tied to the marque, though not literally a Ducati department, assembled the bikes Hailwood would actually ride. The engine itself was an 864 cubic centimeter Ducati twin, air-cooled, built around the bevel-drive layout that shared its casings and engine numbers with the road-going 900 SS, which is why the bike was, and still is, widely called a 900, even though its actual swept capacity was smaller. It ran Ducati's signature desmodromic valve system. Bevel gears and shafts drove the camshafts, and separate cam lobes and rocker arms then positively opened and closed the valves, doing away with the return springs that limit how hard a conventional engine can rev on paper. That's a mechanical curiosity. On the mountain course, it meant an engine built to rev hard and hold its valve timing precisely through 6 punishing laps. Exactly what a road-derived race bike needed to survive, not just to win once. This wasn't new technology built for Hailwood either. Ducati's bevel twin pedigree stretched back to its 1972 Imola win. Team members close to the project, including Ducati importer liaison Pat Slynn, later described a deliberate focus on usable torque, with a special camshaft fitted for exactly that reason. That mattered because the mountain course isn't one long straight. It's over 200 corners strung together, and while top speed, braking, and stability all still counted, a bike that pulled hard out of every corner had a real advantage over one that was merely fast in a straight line. No dyno sheet survives to prove exact output figures, though surviving team accounts put it somewhere in the mid to high 80s horsepower recollections, not documentation, so we won't present a single number as fact. There were real obstacles too. Late in preparation, the team ran into trouble with a modern electronic ignition system and reverted to simple points and coil ignition during race week itself, a decision made under pressure, days before the flag dropped, not a performance breakthrough dreamed up months in advance. It's a small detail, but it says something important. This wasn't a smooth, scripted march to the start line. It was a team solving problems as they came up, right up until race week. But the motorcycle was only half the question. Ducati's machinery had already come within 38.4 seconds of winning the year before, with a different rider. By early 1978, nobody seriously doubted the bike could compete. What remained unanswered was whether a 38-year-old man carrying a badly injured leg who hadn't ridden the mountain course in over a decade could still do what he used to do better than almost anyone alive. Race day was Saturday, June 3rd, 1978. 6 laps, 226.38 miles. The Formula One TT on the same mountain course that had made Hailwood famous 11 years earlier. Doubt 1. Could he still produce raw pace? From a standing start, His opening lap averaged 109.87 miles per hour past stone walls close enough to touch over blind crests through village streets. At that speed, a lap takes a little over 20 minutes. That single lap answered the question before the race was even a third of the way done. Doubt 2. Could he match the reigning champion? Phil Reed, the defending Formula TT champion on his 4-cylinder Honda, had started 50 seconds ahead of Hailwood on the road. By the middle of lap 3, Hailwood had physically caught him. 50 seconds, erased, by a rider a lot of people assumed was there to wave at the crowd one last time. Doubt 3. Could he recover from a setback? At the fuel stop, Hailwood's Ducati was slow to get away. The bike wasn't fitted with a quick filler, and his pit crew had to fight with it to get it closed. Reed got the road position back instantly. It wasn't a coronation, it was a fight, lost and re-won in real time. Hailwood reeled Reed back in as the race wore on, catching him again before either man's race was decided. By that point, before either rival's machine let him down, Hailwood had already beaten Reed twice on the road, proof of pace, not just proof of survival. That matters, because doubt 4, could the bike and the rider survive the full distance, is where attrition enters the story. Reed's Honda broke down with engine trouble on the 5th lap. Tom Herron also retired from the race. The exact mechanical cause isn't something we can confirm with confidence, so we won't guess at it here. Hailwood brought the Ducati home to win by roughly 2 minutes, with a race time of 2 hours, 5 minutes, and 10.2 seconds, an average of 108.51 miles per hour across 6 laps. 4 doubts, 4 answers. John Williams finished second on a Honda, Ian Richards third on a Kawasaki, but neither of them was ever the story. The story was already decided out on the road, laps before the finish line meant anything. Hailwood had established a genuine timed advantage over Reed before either rival's machine ever gave out. Attrition widened the final margin, but it didn't create the advantage out of nothing. Quick pause, because you deserve to know why this channel does what it does. We don't just repeat comeback stories, we test them against the record and show you exactly where they hold up and where they don't. If that's what you're here for, the subscribe button's right there. Now, what this win actually changed and what it didn't. Start with what it did change. Later that June, Hailwood won again at Mallory Park on the Ducati, strong corroborating evidence that his speed wasn't confined to one course he happened to know from memory. Ducati publicized the TT victory hard, and it became the foundation of a new road bike identity, the Mike Hailwood replica, sold from 1979 through 1986, styled after the winning racer rather than built as a mechanical copy of the specialist NCR machine. Ducati has since claimed total replica production topped 7,000 units and delivered much-needed revenue at the time. Its own figure, not an independently audited number, and no verified period UK price survives either. Formula TT, meanwhile, had exactly the kind of early, famous champion a brand new world championship needs to be taken seriously by fans and manufacturers alike. Now, what it didn't change, there's no evidence this single win triggered an industry-wide shift. No rival manufacturer is documented changing a product because of this result. No detailed sales figures confirm an immediate rush of buyers into Ducati showrooms, though Ducati's own account of the replica's eventual 7,000-plus units suggests the win paid off commercially over time, even without a single dramatic spike. It's tempting to reach for a bigger claim here, that this race saved Ducati, or reshaped an entire industry overnight. The record simply doesn't support it. The honest version of this story is a major sporting result with a real lasting brand legacy, not a moment that rewrote motorcycle engineering or forced Japan's manufacturers to respond. So how much of the sporting result belongs to Reed and Herron's retirements? Some, the final margin would have been smaller without them, but not the outcome itself. Remember Nichols, 38.4 seconds behind Reed a year earlier. Now remember Hailwood catching that same rider twice before either rival's race ended. Attrition widened a gap that was already real. It didn't create one out of nothing, though it's fair to say we can never know for certain how the final laps would have played out if both rivals had stayed in the fight. The legacy of that afternoon splits 3 ways, and each one tells you something different about why this story still gets told. For Hailwood personally, it wasn't a one-off. He came back again in 1979 and won the Senior TT. his 14th and final TT victory at 111.75 miles per hour, faster than his 1978 pace. In the Classic TT that same week, he finished second to winner Alex George after a full 6-lap race. Sources differ on the exact margin, putting it anywhere from around 2 to 3.5 seconds, but by any account, it was one of the closest finishes of his career. 1978 wasn't a lucky comeback that couldn't be repeated. It was the opening chapter of a second act that ran through the 1978 and 1979 seasons, not one afternoon that could never be recreated. For Ducati, the legacy is commercial and symbolic rather than technical. The Mike Hailwood replica converted a single race result into a lasting product identity, a road-going 900 SS dressed in racing bodywork styled after the winning bike, though it never claimed to be a copy of the specialist NCR machine that actually won at the TT. No engineering standard, no documented rival response followed, but commercially, Ducati's own figures point to a genuine payoff, a name and a silhouette that Ducati has traded on for decades. That's a brand legacy, not an engineering one, and the difference matters more than most retellings admit. And for the story itself, the legacy is the myth that grew up around it. Somewhere between 1978 and now, 11 years away from the TT, quietly became 11 years without racing a motorcycle at all. The truth is less magical and considerably more useful. A rider who rebuilt current racing form on the other side of the world, a sports motorcycles Ducati effort that had already come close to winning the year before he arrived, and a machine assembled by 3 separate organizations racing against the clock together. That's not a fairy tale about dormant genius suddenly reawakening. It's what it actually takes to win a race like this one, and it's a better explanation than the one that usually gets told. So what did this really mean? Not that a forgotten hero appeared from nowhere and won on nerve alone. It means Hailwood spent 11 years away from the TT and from Grand Prix racing, and spent the months before his comeback quietly rebuilding real racing form, while a dealer, a factory, and a specialist builder assembled him a machine drawn from a program that was already close to winning before he ever rode it. The 50 seconds he erased on Phil Reed is the proof. Pace established against his closest rival, before either man's machine had a say in the outcome. The legend says he came back from nowhere. The stopwatch says he never did. I cover motorcycle history like this every week. The subscribe button is right there. I'll see you in the next one.